I'm absolutely honoured to have this opportunity to visit Cheltenham and the UK, to share my work and meet other writers.
Oh, fantastic. I was at your event last night and this morning, and one of the things that came through for me was identity, really, as a big thing. I remember growing up in Kenya, my identity was never anything, it was just me. But then coming to live here, even though I've lived here for the last 30 years, then identity all of a sudden pops up as a focal point that, you know, that I have to sort of all the time present as who am I. How, in your work that comes very clear. So how did that come about?
Yeah, I was very reluctant to write about identity to begin with. I didn't want to be pigeonholed as a Chinese writer, and I guess I come from a country where it is a very multicultural country, New Zealand, and the history of the Chinese in New Zealand is quite difficult. So they came over as early settlers, as gold miners, but New Zealand has had a terrible sort of race relations issue with the Chinese that basically passed acts that restricted the number of Chinese that could come to New Zealand, and they enforced a poll tax which only the Chinese had to pay in order to come to New Zealand. And the Chinese community had to face a lot of adversity, and they also sort of had to keep their heads down and basically not make trouble and just keep to themselves. And it was only then that sort of the European settlers sort of thought, okay, well, we'll leave you alone now if you don't cause any trouble, if you don't make it too obvious that you're here. And I think that's changed a lot since then, obviously. And I guess I've wanted to write about what it means to be a Chinese New Zealander, not only back at the turn of the century and when they first arrived, but what it means in a contemporary context. And it's because I'm a third generation Chinese New Zealander, and I have a good connection to both, I guess, my New Zealand sort of side and my Chinese side, and it's sort of looking at the tension between the two and trying to unpick what that means and what it might mean in the future, because we're starting to see, in the 1980s they changed the immigration laws so that it was easier for Chinese to immigrate to New Zealand. So that's when we sort of saw a lot of mainland Chinese come into New Zealand, and that sort of changed the Chinese demographic in New Zealand quite a lot, and that sort of added a whole other sort of layer of complexity to the picture.
Oh, fantastic. So I was just thinking the concept of writing, and as you highlight your Chinese and your New Zealand and all that. So for any young people who want to write from the different ethnicity, what would you tell them?
Go ahead and do it. So it took me a long time to trust my instinct and trust that people would be interested in it. Like, for a long time I didn't want to do it because I didn't think people would be interested in it. It was too obvious. And also there was a lack of Chinese voices in New Zealand literature. There were only a few that I could count on one hand. And since I've started writing and publishing a lot more, the number of Chinese and Asian voices in New Zealand has grown as well, because I think there's this need to have those different voices and perspectives represented in our national literature. So for anyone that is wanting to write about their identity and writing about being an outsider or being different, I think it's absolutely integral that they go for it, because it sort of pushes the boundaries and changes what people's expectations are of your quote unquote national literature and what that is meant to represent.
One of the things that for me has been very important growing up, I was lucky enough to have a father who was I think phrased vicar, or pastor, as is well known of. And this is what it meant is during the holidays we had volunteers come from New Zealand, Australia, UK, all over the world. And one of the most important things they did is left their books. So I read widely all over the world. How important is it, do you think, to be able to read widely around the world and the literature that's out there?
I think it's very important that people read widely and try and find, especially writers that are writing about similar issues but in different countries. So, for me, I've been reading people like Chin Chin and Ocean Vuong, who are Asian American writers. They're also both gay, and I wanted to read more writing from a gay Asian perspective because I didn't have that in New Zealand. I wanted to see how other people are writing about it, and for me that has been transformative in a way, because it allows me to see that even if you live in a completely different country, some of those issues are still the same issues, even if the environment or the context is slightly different. And it's been really as a reader, it's opened up my world a whole lot more, but as a writer it's sort of allowed me to sort of push those sort of boundaries that I set myself, and sort of just break that open and just try new things.
So just last thing, for the young person who'll be looking at this and thinking, oh, he looks like me, or what is the advice you'll give that person?
What sort of advice about writing? Yep. I think the advice that I would give someone like that is to just do it. You're a writer if you put words on a page or on a screen, and the thing is, representation really matters. I know for me, I thought that I was writing for myself because it was my way of understanding who I was and who I am, and unpicking the things that have sort of led me to be the person I am. And what I often don't appreciate is that there are people out there who see themselves in my work and have told me that it has meant so much to them to be able to see themselves reflected in someone else's words like that. And that's exactly what I do when I seek out writing by other gay poets or Asian or Chinese poets, because I want to find myself reflected in that writing. So it's a bit of a switch. It's like, well, I do that as a reader, but why don't I sort of appreciate that and sort of use that as a writer? And I've started to sort of grow into that and lean into that a little bit more.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you. Cheers.